you want to get started?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. I'm Tammy. I'm back again with Mark Burkell. You're listening to the Marchive. Today we're going to jump right into the concept that we discussed at the end of yesterday's show, which is the Church of Reality. November 7th, 1998, Mark was in his home alone, having a joint, when he had a moment of insight. Mark, tell us about that.
I was sitting at home smoking a joint, and when I smoke a joint, I often, it inspires creative thinking. For some reason, I was thinking about religion. There's probably the religion and politics that was happening that day. And, every religion thinks they're the one true religion. And there's only one religion at best that could be the one true religion, and that's the one that gets it right. So I was just a thought experiment. I thought, if there were such a thing as the one true religion, what would it look like? And I thought, well, it would be the religion that believed in what was real. And then I thought Church of Reality. And then I thought, wow, surely I'm not the first person to have thought of this. It turns out, at least from the point of view of the internet, that I was. I couldn't find anything out there that was really a Church of Reality.
Give us a little background on you. The way that I understand it, you're ethnically Jewish, but you were not brought up in an observant Jewish home. Is that right?
My parents did celebrate Passover and did go to synagogue every now and then.
Did you attend Hebrew school?
I did for a very short period of time until I was thrown out for misbehavior.
What kind of misbehavior?
Well, just being a pain in the ass, not showing up and making it clear that I really didn't want to be there, and convinced the rabbi that he really didn't want me there either. It was kind of a mutual thing that if I didn't show up, he was happier than if I did. I had no interest in it.
When this moment of insight came to you, did you consider yourself at that point to be an atheist, an agnostic, a lapsed Jew? How did you identify?
I've always kind of held on to a little bit of cultural Jewish, because unlike Christians, Jewish isn't that heavy duty of a religion unless you're Orthodox, and that wasn't part of my world. Jews don't have the same rebellion against Judaism when they become an atheist that Christians have when they become an atheist. So I was an atheist, but Jews don't care if you're an atheist or not. A huge percentage of Jews are atheists.
Do you think that's because Jews as a religion don't have a clear understanding of the afterlife? In Christianity, if you're not a believer, one of the innovations that Jesus brought in the New Testament was the concept of hell, which is eternal torture at the hands of a loving God.
Yeah, Jews don't have that.
Is that part of the reason you think it's easier for Jews to essentially make the transition to non-religiosity without getting a lot of blowback? Yeah,
Judaism is more cultural, I think. They don't look at these old stories as if this literally happened.
So at this moment that you're sitting on your couch, you identify ethnically and culturally as Jewish, but you identify spiritually as atheist?
Technically atheist because I didn't believe in any gods, but I would probably have identified myself as a nun, no religion, disinterested in religion, have nothing to do with religion.
For those who don't know, nuns can be atheists, agnostic, questioning, people that follow spiritual paths that don't have a religious cast to them. So nuns is a bigger group than atheists.
Right. Which is, as you said, very broad. But then it occurred to me, the idea of Church of Reality was originally, believing in what's real, and it just was so obvious.
Let me ask a question, because I'm sure some people have a fairly deep, intense interest in this subject, know that there are certain arguments about nature being visual proof of the hand of God. When you talk about the Church of Reality, you're not talking about worshiping creation.
No, there's no worshiping of anything. The original concept has evolved quite a bit over time. When I first came up with the idea, that was like, okay, this is kind of cute, an interesting way to piss off religious people was one of my first thoughts. But the idea of a religion based on believing in what's real just was intriguing.
Let's talk about believing, because one of the things that I want to make sure we do is that we explain what we mean by the words that we use.
Okay.
How do you define belief as opposed to knowledge?
I know that the word belief is a kind of an atheist trigger word, that pisses off atheists, but it's what you do. What do I believe? Do I believe evolution? Do I believe science? Do I believe the Bible?
Does the word belief for you indicate some uncertainty? For instance, the difference between saying, I believe it's going to rain today, so I'm taking an umbrella, and I know it's raining outside, so I'm taking an umbrella. The difference between believing and knowing, is that an important distinction in the Church of Reality?
Well, the thing is that knowing is sort of the result of doing science, the way I see it. And, what you know is always incomplete. There's always deeper levels of understanding what you know. And, you always, in the scientific world, have to be unsure a little bit about what you know, because what you think you know today, it might not be the same as what you know tomorrow. And you might find out that what you thought was true isn't true anymore.
I'd like to nail down, when we talk about belief as opposed to knowledge, again, the example being, I believe it's going to rain today, so I'm going to prepare by taking my umbrella. Versus, I know it's raining right this second, I'm leaving and taking my umbrella. The word that comes to mind is faith, which is how much confidence do you have in what you believe?
No, faith is one of those other tricky words, because generally in religious terms, faith is sort of the act of ignoring reality and deciding to believe something, whether it's true or not.
Religious people have defined it as belief in the evidence of things not seen. When we talk about, I have faith in the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, I believe that a hurricane is headed my way, therefore I'm going to board up my windows. That use of the term faith really means more confidence.
Right.
Question of rationality.
The thing that makes the Church of Reality distinctive from all other religions is that it really is about seeking the truth, the real truth, and nothing but the truth, the way things really are. And, accept the disciplines of science as the way of obtaining the truth, that the truth is testable, the truth is universal, that if I measure the speed of light, and you measure the speed of light, we're going to get the same answer regardless of deities we believe in.
Let's talk about what we mean by the term church before we move on.
Well, I was sort of, grabbed the name. It was compete with the religious world. I felt like of all the religious organizations, reality should be one of the choices.
Obviously, Christians say church, Jews say temple.
Right. I think that
the way that I understand the term church generically is it's a place to go and be with others who share your beliefs.
Right. And actually, if I had to do it over again, I might have used Temple of Reality, which is a domain name that I think I still own that I've never used. I picked it, I went with it, and looking back at it, that might not have been the best idea, because the Church of Reality has never taken off. It has value in that I've written an incredible amount of material there. Much more material than I ever thought that I was ever going to come up with. Religious people seem to actually be more interested in the Church of Reality than atheists, because atheists, as soon as you say the word church, it turns them off. They don't hear anything else. They've already turned on the mute button, and they're not hearing a thing that I have to say after I say the C word.
There are some spiritual practices on the planet Earth that do not involve God or gods.
Right.
Certain, disciplines of meditation and things like that, and certain Eastern religions and certain pagan practices that don't require a belief in a supreme being or beings, invisible supernatural creatures. Were you hoping that the Church of Reality was going to be a gathering place, a virtual gathering place for people who shared your appreciation for reality, your belief in reality? Or was it more a repository of the most advanced thinking on the questions of reality as a singular virtue? And I do want to talk about reality as a virtue as well.
Yeah. Well, I had hoped that other people would have gotten excited about the idea, people who are more in the religious world, that would have taken the idea and made it into real churches, where people would come and discuss the philosophies, the more the social thing. And I personally am not that social a person to where I would, go to, a Church of Reality church every Sunday. I'm more of the philosopher. the person who puts the ideas together.
We've defined church as a gathering place for people who share a belief. We've defined belief and faith. Belief is simply what you think is true, and faith is your level of confidence in that belief. So what I want to do now is have you walk me through the proof. You have on your Church of Reality site a statement of principle that the right answer has more value than the wrong answer, which would sound like a fairly simple statement of fact. However, it's complicated by the word value. I want to make sure that we're talking about value in the mathematical sense, not in the moralistic sense. So tell us what you think value means.
When I started really getting into the Church of Reality, that's one of the concepts I came up with. Because the thing about the Church of Reality is that I just can't make up stuff. It can't be Mark Burkell's subjective opinion. I have to be able to show my work. I have to say, this is true, and this is why it's true, so that people can reproduce the thinking and evaluate for themselves and see if they come to the same conclusion.
So if somebody walked into the room with you right now who said, I heard that you're the founder of something called the Church of Reality. What is that all about? How would you start them on the path of reality as a way of life?
A realist, of course, is completely devoted to understanding reality the way it is. So in the Church of Reality, science is the Bible. Evidence is Scripture. So what you have to do is you need to be able to unlearn all the stuff that you've learned that's wrong. And that's one of the things that is very important, because everybody grows up with information that you have to unlearn, or things that are difficult to learn because they're counterintuitive.
Give us an example.
Well, I remember in grade school when I was told that whales are not fish. Whales are mammals. But a whale looks like a fish and it lives in the water. So that doesn't make sense to me. First, you want to resist that. When they say whales and porpoises, and there's, things out there that are swimming that look like fish. They got fins like fish. They live in the water, and they're not fish.
Right. I just recently, for the first time, visited the Austin bat colony that lives underneath our Ann Richards Congress Avenue Bridge, and bats are not birds.
Bats are not birds.
Bats are not birds. Whales are not fish.
Finding out that birds are really lizards with feathers.
Right. So what you're saying is the term common sense, to me, hides a multitude of wrong information. Well, if it swims in the ocean, obviously it's a fish. It's just common sense. What you're talking about is helping people unlearn common sense conclusions that are faulty.
Ideas that are counterintuitive. The whole idea that the universe, was smaller than an atom, when it started, that's hard to wrap your head around. Speed of light is a limitation that you can't go faster than the speed of light. What do you mean I can't go faster than the speed of light? Who's telling me I can't go faster than the speed of light?
Another faulty reasoning that we deal with in our country is the idea that there are two genders, male and female, when actually that's not the case. There are XX, there are XYs, there are XXX, there are XXYs, there are XYYs. There are a whole multitude of iterations of gender. So when a person says, there are boys and girls and they have parts that fit together a certain way, and therefore, gay marriage is wrong. I often find myself when somebody says to me, it's just common sense, I feel my hackles go up, because the most extraordinary discoveries of humankind, all the way back to Galileo and Newton, were counterintuitive, right? A heavy object should fall faster than a lighter object. It just should.
Yeah.
It makes sense. Only
right.
It doesn't.
Yes.
Acceleration is acceleration. In a
Right.
vacuum, it doesn't matter whether you are dropping a grain of salt or the earth. Acceleration is acceleration. How do you help a person reduce their level of faith in wrong beliefs? How do you reduce their level of confidence in wrong ideas and move them into correct ideas?
When a person just wants to really know what really is true, not what their church says is true and their friends say is true and what people in their groups expect them to believe is true, but what actually is true.
What made it valuable to you to know the truth? I mean, I know the answer for myself. I was brought up in a Christian home, and I found myself constantly torn. Reality constantly tore at my understanding of God. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, who is himself, to suffer and commit suicide by Roman cop. If there is a loving God, why did my best friend die of leukemia when she was 13? If there is a loving God, why was there a Holocaust? The reason that the truth has value to me is the moment that I embraced reality as my highest value. What that did for me was it made the world make sense in a way it never had before. I was no longer conflicted and emotionally distressed by the world around me.
My religious conversion, for lack of a better word, I mean, I've sort of always been a realist, but early on, they tried to teach me Judaism. So there's this God up there in the sky that's watching everything and manipulating things for you if you pray, and you don't want to piss him off.
As a Christian, check it out. This is one of the craziest things you're ever going to. This is insane, but bear with me.
Okay.
God knows everything that has ever happened or ever will happen.
Right.
He knows every decision you're going to make.
Right.
And yet you have free will, but everything is predestined.
Right.
There's no way for a person to believe all of those things at the same time.
Yeah, if God has foreknowledge, you can't have free will. It's
exactly.
They're mutually exclusive.
I am basically a pawn on a chessboard where every move that is going to be made by every piece that ever existed is already a known thing.
Right.
A fairly curious and intellectually open child to ask these kinds of questions in a religious setting causes all manner of, I don't know what the right word is. In Jewish, the word is surus, upset, angst, whatever. When you present a question like that in a religious context, the reflexive answer is, you're having a crisis of faith. Your faith is being tested. You have to just accept that this is true, even though it makes no sense and causes you intellectual and emotional distress. The thing about reality is, the only real thing that is in my life that was difficult, and you tell me if this is true for you, and we'll talk a little bit about your current situation. The most difficult part of reality for me to accept was that someday I would no longer exist at all. That was the hard part for me.
Yeah, that's hard for everybody, Yeah,
here I am, this identity, this personality is an incredibly complex creature, and that someday the machine that this creature lives in is going to break down, and this creature is not going to exist anymore. You right now, going on, 23 months?
Yeah, 22 months.
Found out that you had a terminal disease.
Right.
When you received your terminal diagnosis, did you have a crisis of faith in reality or no?
No, that made reality even more prominent. Yeah, there's no temptation whatsoever to become religious at the end. It might be more tempting if I had ever been into religion, to go back to something I was familiar with. But to me, Christianity is just as foreign a religion as Islam or Buddhism, I've never been Christian, and I've never really been Jewish, and Judaism doesn't have a whole lot of artificial hope for, life after death like other religions do. So there really isn't any, anything to go back to in that respect. And the thing about it is, the reason I'm still alive is by fully embracing reality. I mean, I'm alive because of, I took my situation, I just, as they say in the movie The Martian, scienced the hell out of this thing and came up with my own treatment plan, that was 100% based on science, and these treatments worked. And I'm still here, and people of faith, who had, lung cancer and the same thing, got standard of care, and they're dead.
I'm was brought up in the South, which means manners are extremely important to me. Kindness, the social lubricant that we play to be able to move through society with the least amount of friction. Manners, etiquette, civility matter a great deal to me, but certain things push my buttons. One of them is when a person has a good medical outcome, right? A woman with breast cancer has a double mastectomy and the chemo and the radiation, and 5 years later she's cancer-free. And people say to her, thank God. And I think, no, thank the radiologist, the surgeon, the biochemist who created the chemotherapy, the entire medical team and the researchers that underpin it that made it possible for you to defeat this disease. And similarly, it can be upsetting for me when a natural disaster occurs and a person whose home and family survived will say, praise be to God that I wasn't, that we were not taken. And it's almost as though they're implying that the family who was destroyed and whose home was destroyed by God purposefully. It's a weird.
Well, they like to think that maybe they were saved purposefully. I think that, the one that got destroyed purposefully is, they really don't want to think of it in those terms. And, it's like, if you really believe in God and you really believe in an afterlife and that you're going to be up in heaven with God, then you want to be the ones who don't survive. I imagine that, they have a plane crash, and there's one survivor, and the survivor, is on some talk show, and they say, why do you think survive? Do you think that God, made you survive? And no, God left me behind and took everybody else up to heaven and left me here,
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept. I've seen research that indicates that atheists are more likely to have do not resuscitate orders and living wills that specify that they don't want extraordinary measures taken in a hopeless situation, whereas religious people tend to want all of the stops pulled out to prevent death.
Right.
Which would seem to be counterintuitive.
Right. And they all turn to science in the end, They want that miracle drug, They want the hospitals, using, the best science to, fix their incurable disease. So, everybody turns to reality in the end.
They say there are no atheists in foxholes. That every atheist, when the guano hits the fan, that every atheist prays to God to help them. But I would say that there are no believers in cancer wards.
Well,
nobody is throwing themselves on the mercy of God when they get maybe Christian scientists, maybe the people who don't believe in medicine, but most everybody, when they're confronted with a physically dangerous or deadly situation, does turn to medicine for an answer.
Right.
For help. Obviously, these conversations are going to go where they go, but what I'd like for you to do is rudimentarily start us down the path of reality as a path, as a way of life, as a way of existing in this world and behaving in this society. Walk us through the rudiments of it. Get us started, because I know we're going to go pretty deep into some concepts, but just get us started going down that path of discovery and adoption of reality.
Well, let me first, go through some of the history of the Church of Reality and how it evolved from the original idea. I get the idea, and then the next day I go out and I register the domain name churchofreality.org. And, if you look up the registration date, that's the day after I got the idea. So then I thought, well, what am I going to put on this website? What do I know that's true and real, that's going to be true and real a million years from now and still be relevant to anybody who reads this? Didn't come up with a whole lot that wasn't already just repeating science. 2 + 2 = 4 will still be 2 + 2 = 4 a billion years from now. And then it occurred to me that the pursuit of the understanding of reality is really what the Church of Reality is about. So it's not making a list of everything that's real to believe in it, to create a static book that's not going to change. The Church of Reality's literature, the scripture of the Church of Reality, is going to be dynamic. It's going to change as science changes and we discover more things. So the Church of Reality became a commitment to the pursuit of the understanding of reality, so that tomorrow you know more about reality than you know today. So if you know more about reality tomorrow than you know today, then you're going in the right direction. And if you know less about reality tomorrow than today, then you're going in the wrong direction. You have a way of measuring progress because progress is measured in the increase in understanding reality. Now, humans don't understand reality individually. We have a collective mind, a society in which we understand reality collectively, that we're all dependent on each other to figure out parts of reality and accumulate this into a shared library of information that we all draw from. Borrowing a religious term, that's what we call the tree of knowledge, except it's really more of a mathematical tree than a physical tree, like, in biblical terms. Since this is a religion, I wanted to use religious language to help people identify with religious symbolism to make things that are sacred,
Right, to make the alternatives clear.
Yeah, to interject reality into the religious conversation. What this all means is that, when it comes down to it, if you put reality first, that means you have to put all your other beliefs that you have to get rid of at some point if they don't meet the test of reality. In other words, we don't deliberately not believe in God. We don't believe in God because God doesn't actually exist, and I'm talking about, the God of the Bible, or any of those deity type gods. They're not real, and therefore you don't believe them because they're not real. Now, if one of these gods showed up and could be photographed and measured and interviewed, then that God would be real, and we would believe in it because it was there, it was measurable, it was scientifically provable. So if there were such thing as God, we would believe in it. No, it's just that it's not real.
It sounds like what you're saying is reality, in a way, is a rejection of the supernatural, because the tools that we use to quantify and to identify real things are natural tools.
There is no such thing as supernatural, because if something exists, then it's part of the real world. And if it's part of the real world, it's part of the natural world.
Yes.
So if it's not part of the real natural world, it's part of the world that doesn't exist. There isn't a third category of things that are outside of testable reality, even theoretically testable reality, that you can't say that, this thing exists, but it will be forever be unprovable and unmeasurable. And it's just something that somebody, goat herders thousands of years ago, made up a story.
So what would you say to the philosophical statement, if the human mind can conceive it, it is real? It becomes real in the conception in the human mind.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. People can imagine anything they want. Star Trek is real. Reality is the stuff that doesn't go away when you stop believing in it. I can change my belief about cancer, and that doesn't make my cancer go away no matter how much I concentrate or believe or that the cancer is gone. I just can't just imagine my way out of it that way.
But you are aware that there are certain practices here in the United States and around the world, famous books like The Secret that essentially say if you can visualize an outcome, your visualization of the outcome forces it into reality. New Age practices that propose that essentially the act of, sort of like when we were little and they said if you said Bloody Mary into the mirror 3 times and opened your eyes, you would see her in the room. The power of suggestion.
Right.
The power of us to terrify ourselves or to create our own gods of imagination. You would basically say what to those practices?
That's just yet another religion. That's believing in things that aren't true. Not all religions have to do with deities. There's a lot of people who believe weird things that, aren't true, but they just like the idea of believing them because it makes they have friends who believe them, and they're part of a group of people who all enjoy believing in something that isn't true.
So let's get back to the early origins of the Church of Reality.
Okay.
We've talked through different paths, but again, I want to start people on the rudimentary basic steps, getting to a point where reality is seen as the highest good, and good in the subjective sense, not in the moralistic sense.
Right.
And how to practice it in your daily life.
Well, one of the things about, that I realized about the Church of Reality is that, in order to pursue the understanding of reality and to pursue it collectively as a society, we have to live in a society that survives and thrives, so that if the human race goes extinct, all that knowledge is lost. We have to have schools and roads and energy and food and justice and all the things that make life worth living, and take care of all that so that we have free time to look through telescopes and microscopes and do science and discover reality. The moral integrity of society, what's right and wrong. When we make a law, and we want our laws to be fair and just and relevant and promote the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all that stuff. The reason for doing all that is, for our common, that we thrive and survive, and that's necessary in order to pursue science and understand reality. And then the benefits of that is that we invent new things that make life easier. For instance, me and you are having this conversation because cell phones exist and the infrastructure to communicate. We can digitally record this stuff, and we can do it for free.
It sounds like you're saying there is a moral obligation to create an environment in which the expansion of our understanding of reality grows.
If we assume, is one of the axioms of the Church of Reality, that the increase in the understanding of reality has value, then you need to support the physical mechanisms for which the understanding of reality occurs. If we live in a society where there's peace and prosperity, we're going to have the resources to do science and understand reality and explore the universe, find out, how old is the universe, gravity waves and lasers and microchips and all the incredible stuff that we learn about the universe. We do that because we live in a functional society. If we're in North Korea, they're not, doing quantum particle experiments and things like that. They're not, developing new science there because they live in a dysfunctional society that doesn't support science.
But would you also agree that part of the pursuit of reality is pursuing the truth of our own history, our own anthropology as the human species, coming to a place of honesty about our past as a species? Is that also important?
To some extent, yes. The more we understand, the better.
I would give the example of the current controversy over the United States Confederacy. The idea that there is one group of people that sees the Confederacy as a treasonous rebellion that was instigated by a desire to maintain an economic order that was based on slave labor and human chattel bondage, right? And then there's the other side that says, no, the U.S. Confederacy was really just a collection of culturally like-minded people who wanted to preserve their way of life, and slavery had nothing to do with it. The forward-looking science is not nearly as controversial as the backward-looking evolution, very controversial. Anthropology, extremely controversial. Paleontology, very controversial. History, super controversial. Do you believe the pursuit of reality needs to be in both directions of the arrow of time, forward and backwards, in order for us to fully embrace reality in all of its forms? Or do you believe the forward-looking arrow of scientific discovery is more important than the backward-looking arrow of history, archaeology, paleontology, and evolution?
My opinion is that forward is more important than backwards. It's nice to look at the past and try to figure it out and to derive information that can be used in the future, but you can't change the past, but you can create the future. So what you do in the present is the thing that makes the future. You can derive wisdom and knowledge from the past, and of course the science that we have today is discovered yesterday, and the science we have tomorrow will be what we had yesterday combined with what we come up with new today. And some of these things that happened in the past can be looked at from different perspectives. And it's worth, exploring that, in order to try to derive knowledge from the information that's there. The purpose of that is to get useful knowledge to understand reality better, so that our future is better than our past, that we're improving and that we're moving in the right direction.
And I would say that evolutionary biology, that modern medicine as we understand it, would not be possible without evolutionary biology.
Yeah, well, that gives us a very deep understanding into knowing where we came from and how we got here. It might give us a clue as to where we should be going into the future. As far as learning from the past, history is always written by the victor. In any wars, had the South won the Civil War, then we would be looking at history from a different point of view.
To say that history is written by the victor, a Christian would say the leader of our spiritual army was executed, and we are more influential in the world than any other religion. That's what they would say. We were not the victor at Golgotha, the Mount of Skulls. We were not the victor there, but the idea is that defeat that we suffered was actually a victory, if that makes sense.
That's because they're still around and they get to make claims about their history. The ones that aren't around anymore are irrelevant. The argument about why to continue to exist is important. Because if you don't maintain existence, and by existence I mean the extinction of humanity, then all this goes away. You're no longer part of reality. You're no longer a member of reality. And in order to be part of reality and a member of reality and to understand reality, you have to maintain your membership in reality. But you have to realize that this planet is our spaceship, and that if we don't maintain it in a habitable way, then we no longer get to be part of reality. This thing becomes just yet another rock orbiting yet another star, orbiting yet another galaxy in amongst trillions of galaxies. What makes us special is knowledge. This is one of the few rocks in the universe where knowledge exists, and that makes it unique and valuable, and makes this planet an exceptional place.
The practice of reality as a lifestyle, how would you say that differs from other paths of ways of life? What are the imperatives? Obviously, we talked about the maintenance of the habitat and placing value upon forward-looking, progressive, scientific and technological and knowledge-based advancements. But what are the other imperatives for reality as a lifestyle?
A lot has to do with just the way you think in general, the core of your being, what it is that's important. There are people who are not that scientifically inclined, and they just want to live a good life and be a good person in society and do the right thing, and they want somebody else to be able to tell them what the right thing is to do. Somebody who's really into realism is also going to be really into science. They need to be curious and want to know more things. And they want to know more true things. And they also need to have the ability to purge out information that's not true. I think that a lot of people, and a lot of limitations of society, is that the people can learn new stuff, but getting rid of old stuff is a barrier.
What that is?
I think getting rid of old stuff is a learned habit that you have to get into. People get familiar with certain ideas and they get comfortable with it, and it sort of becomes part of the fabric of how they think and who they are. So tearing a piece of that out is somewhat painful because it makes people feel vulnerable that they could be that wrong. And they may have social connections based on that. If you're going to a church and you have established a circle of friends, and that's part of your society, and then you marry somebody in the church, so your part of society is two people who are, raising their children, and the children become friends with the other people's children, and they go over to their houses, and they come over to your house, and it's this whole society that you're, infused as part of. This is your life. You could get thrown out of that life, you, your spouse, your kids, and that becomes devastating, and then, well, what do I replace that with? People are herd animals, we need friends, we need to associate, we need to cooperate, with other people, because everybody is dependent on everybody else for everything that they get. look around your house at all your stuff and realize that everything you own was built by other people.
What would you say to the American concept of the rugged individual, the lone wolf, the solitary man on horseback, the kind of romantic fantasy of an individual completely self-sufficient and unconnected to any other living thing, except for the horse, I guess, that he's on the back of?
Well, he's got clothes on and he's got a saddle, and that came from other people. And if he's eating, he's probably got a weapon that was made by other people, unless he's bareback on the horse and he's naked, or wearing a skin that was made from something that he killed, that he cut with a stone tool that he made.
This is interesting that you're saying all of this, because what you're doing is you're saying to get to a concept of the rugged individual, you essentially have to shed all of the trappings of civilization.
Yeah, you go back in history 100,000 years and there's your rugged individual.
So you're saying that civilization and modernity put the lie to the concept of the rugged individual, that we are all interrelated, interdependent, interconnected.
Right.
All of our actions have knock-on effects for all of the rest of us. Humanity is more of an organism than a collection of individuals.
Exactly. The use of language is for communicating to other individuals. All our words were words that were invented by other people. And when we use these words to think, the words we think with are words that came from other people. A true individual would be something that was raised in the wild with no other humans around, that would have no language and would not think in words. And as an animal, it probably wouldn't be very bright, even though it has the same physical brain as other people. Our knowledge and our thinking comes from our relationships with other people. We are more tied together than bees in a hive. I really look at humanity as a single organism in one context, and all life on Earth is a single organism, that somewhere 4 billion years ago, some chemical reaction around a volcanic vent down in the ocean started the first individual life form, and that we're all descendants from that. We're biologically related. I had a squirrel in 55 million years ago. Me and that squirrel had a common ancestor. That squirrel is my cousin. We are biologically related to each other.
When you observe the world, warts and all, good and bad, the human affinities are obvious. Love, companionship, friendship, cooperation, the affinities make sense. How, viewing the human species as a single organism, do you understand the opposite of the affinities? The war, the subjugation, the oppression. How does the practice of reality explain man's inhumanity to man and to other living things? How does reality help us understand the negative aspects of the human existence?
Evolution isn't exactly, a pretty process for designing things. Individuals want things. I want things to be better for me. What I want for me and what you want for you may not be the same thing. There's a piece of meat laying there and we're going to fight over who gets to eat it, is the most primitive version of that. Now, over time, people figured out that, if we share the meat and we hunt together and we cooperate, that we can work together to kill a big animal, and then we can both share the big animal. That led to a survival advantage. And nomadic tribes, a small group of people running into a small group of people, males fighting with males over who gets to mate with the females. There was just a lot of that going on in history, as to some extent still does today. We're still figuring out what the best way to live is. It's basically, most of the figuring out has been based on who survives, and that's a very long process. And it's just recently in human history that logic and reason has come out as a smarter, faster, more accurate alternative to boost evolution. It's a paradigm shift in evolution. That reason and logic is new, and it's not dominant yet. And I suppose that one of the goals of the Church of Reality is to make that the dominant factor and look back at the things that have been going on forever.
Well, let me ask you a question. Right now, denominationally, the largest denomination in the United States are the nuns. No religion, atheist, agnostic, does not identify with any religion. Right now, that is the largest denomination in America. bigger than Southern Baptists, bigger than Irish Catholics are the nuns. Do you believe that that's a reflection of this evolutionary leap towards an appreciation of reality? Or do you believe that it's a disenchantment with specific religious practices?
It's sort of both, because we're living a world where there's the rise of science. And a lot of that is coming from the internet, which the internet is an infrastructure that allows humans to share knowledge in a way that we've never been able to do before. A person can have an idea, get on the web for free, and post something that everybody on the planet who has access to the internet can see. And that kind of power creates an immense amount of knowledge which people can interact with. The Church of Reality exists in that environment because I could make a website and everybody in the world can find out about the word Church of Reality, and it costs me really nothing to do that. The cost of publishing on the internet is really pretty much zero for all practical purposes.
The downside of that, obviously, is that as easy as it is to post a good idea, it's that easy to post a bad idea.
Right.
As easy as it is to post factual information and true information, it's equally as easy to post false information and ahistorical information. And so, we're finding out that the freedom of the internet, the freeness of it, the inexpensive nature of it as a tool of dissemination is, it does have a downside, right?
Yeah, well, like everything, and if there's a way to exploit it, for personal gain, people will figure out how to do that.
Still, the incentives for reality to prevail are higher than the incentives for non-reality to prevail.
Non-reality or anti-reality can't actually prevail because it leads to non-existence.
But you're talking about on a timeline that is longer than the human lifespan, right?
We're here because we're the descendants of those who lived in right relationship to reality. The people who figured it out got it right. Living in relationship with reality, to embrace reality and pursue reality, is always going to win over the opposite because our methods make things better.
It sounds like you're saying that our species is guaranteed success because evolution won't permit us to fail. I don't think that's true.
No, I'm not saying that. If we make the wrong decision, we're extinct and then we drop out of reality. And then supposedly something somewhere else evolves, and when something gets it right, they get to advance, and when they don't get it right, they end. Some other planet somewhere else in the universe, the individuals there will make a better decision than we did, and then they'll go on and they'll be the species that is the most advanced species in the universe.
One of the things that I struggle with are perverse incentives. The concept that maybe 150 years ago, the Industrial Revolution was the thing that made the most sense for human beings surviving and thriving, right?
Right.
And maybe burning fossil fuels and mining coal and a society based on consumption.
Yeah, that was a good thing at the time. In fact, my opinion is that the real reason that slavery ended was because of the Industrial Revolution, that we could get machines to do the things that we used to have slaves to do.
The downside of that is that we didn't have a full understanding of our environmental impacts.
Right, yeah, so we started putting poisons in the air and the water, and then we realized that, okay, well, that's not a good idea. And now we're working on ways to do things in a way that doesn't screw up the livability of our spaceship that we're on, the planet.
There are some people who say that trying to repair the damage that we've done to this planet is not a worthwhile exercise. We need to focus all of our resources and all of our brain power on getting off this rock.
Nobody really says that seriously. We're not going to migrate the people of the Earth onto another planet. We either fix it or we die.
They're not saying zap 6, 7, 8, 9 billion people onto another planet. What they're saying is this human species on this Earth is headed for a breakdown, and a few elites start a new world somewhere else.
I don't really see it that way. I see it as the next thing to explore is colonizing Mars and colonizing space. So the only reason that it involves elites is because that's not the type of thing that just anybody is going to do. You're not going to have the average guy being the first people to live on Mars.
Well, but that's not true, Mark. The people who settled the West were not the elite.
Yeah, but
Who settled the West tended to be people with no resources who understood that there was a homestead law and that if they could make their way out west, grab their piece of land, hold it, and farm it and survive, that would be a way for them to get out of the poverty that they were in. So this idea that the frontiersmen are the elite, that's a concept.
yeah, well, that's because they're on Earth. Compare it with the people who first went down to the South Pole in Antarctica. Those were not the average guys. A place like Mars makes Antarctica look like a tropical paradise. You're not going to make it to Mars on the first ships that go there unless you're an elite. They're not going to send dumbasses to Mars. Not going to happen.
We've sort of touched on a lot of subjects, but your description of the rigors, the rituals of a life of reality are the consumption of new information as it becomes available, the curiosity to want to be following advancements.
The benefits of getting to do new things, the ability for me and you to communicate over cell phones over vast distances, unlimited distances as far as place on Earth goes, that everybody has these computers, the medical stuff that we understand. We can take the heart out of one person and stick it in another person. These are amazing abilities. Our lifespan is 3 times as long as what our lifespan used to be just a few hundred years ago. Just because we developed the flush toilet and then antibiotic pushed our lifespan up to where it is today. And we're making advances today that's going to push it up further. Eventually, there won't be such a thing as a lifespan. We'll be able to go on forever in machine form or biological replacement bodies. And we're only going to get that by pursuing reality.
Do you believe that part of the pursuit of reality as a way of life, as a path, is questioning the ethics of forward movement?
Well, yeah, you always got to question what you're doing and is this the right thing? And then you have to have a way of determining.
How does reality inform an ethical judgment?
That can get somewhat complex, but generally you can take the idea of what's good for the evolutionary future of humanity as a broad, fundamental concept for which other concepts are based on.
One of the things that I think we have to accept is that we can't always, even given the best science available and the most cautious approach to big decisions, that sometimes we do make faulty decisions. There was actually a right decision made not to destroy smallpox. We eradicated it as a disease, but the organism itself we allowed to exist under very secure circumstances. And that particular pathogen is being used in cancer research to treat gliomas, brain cancers, and is having some success. And it's an interesting question. Do human beings have the foresight to play out all possible scenarios and not to make what they think are good decisions that ultimately turn out to be bad decisions or self-limiting decisions? And again, we go back to the question of the energizing of the industrial age and how we did not know back then that consumption as a model and the burning of fossil fuels as a model might create negative realities down the line that might inhibit our survival and thriving on this planet.
Well, making mistakes is part of the process of figuring out how to get it right.
How do you put reality in a position to prevail over plutocracy, oligarchy? How do you make reality competitive? The pure sciences don't necessarily make people rich. Down the line, yes, but in the moment, no. How do you give reality a fighting chance against incumbent, non-reality-based thinking that is incredibly lucrative?
The point is somebody's immediate self-interest versus the benefit of the whole. In the long run, the benefit of the whole makes you richer than your momentary flash of greed. The momentary greed might get you more right now than it does in the long run.
But the human life is not lived in the long run. Our lives are very short.
Right.
So we can make bad decisions that harm the society in our lifetime.
That's where society has to teach people about the big picture. The reason you don't want to steal is because you don't want people to steal from you. You don't want to lie because you don't want people to lie to you. In the big picture, the fundamentals like not stealing and not lying is better. And when people learn to think in terms of the big picture, and get more of the big picture out there, what is the big picture? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of existence? That's one of the things that the Church of Reality does that is similar to other religions, but it does it from a scientific point of view, is actually answer the questions about meaning of life and purpose of existence and what we should be doing when we wake up in the morning, the philosophy of science. And that's where even among the scientific people, they tend to avoid philosophy because they think of philosophy as a form of religion and it's voodoo and it has nothing to do with science, but it does. Let's say I was arguing with somebody like Sam Harris. The question, what is the meaning of meaning? Is a science person might say the universe just exists and the earth is another rock, and if the earth didn't exist, it wouldn't mean anything to the universe. The universe has plenty of other rocks that are orbiting stars, and we're just one of trillions of them. But on the other hand, if somebody says, well, nothing has meaning, then I would argue that if I have the right answer, something does have meaning and has the right answer, his answer can never be better than my answer, because even if I get it wrong, who's to say that the right answer is better than the wrong answer, you see? So no matter what kind of an argument he makes, I can say, well, your answer is never better than my answer or a religious answer, because they're just answers. To make one answer better than the other answer, a right answer is better than a wrong answer, is a value judgment, and that is the fundamental axiom for which the word better, the value, and meaning come from.
I would call that the golden rule of reality. The right answer, the truth, has more value than the wrong answer, a lie.
Right.
So when we say value, we don't mean morally. 1 is greater than 0, 2 is greater than 1. And truth is greater than a lie. The greater than symbol not conferring any moral judgment. About your judgment of the worth of the relative item.
I could write down 2 plus 2 equals 4, and I can write down that 2 plus 2 equals 3. And those are both mathematical statements. And when you look at it, say, well, those things look like it's the same. There's no difference. But there is a difference in that one of them is the right answer and the other one is the wrong answer. The assertion in the Church of Reality, the basic axiom of the Church of Reality, is that the right answer is qualitatively different than the wrong answer, and it is better than the wrong answer, and it has more value than the wrong answer. Evolution is based on that. Evolution is a simple formula, randomness that selects on survivability. Survivability is the things that got it right. The right answer allows them to maintain their existence or the membership in reality, and the wrong answer gets you excommunicated from reality, to non-existence, where you don't matter anymore. You can't do anything. You're not part of what's happening.
You're not on the chessboard anymore.
You're off the chessboard. Your piece is gone, and you're not a player anymore because you did the wrong thing.